Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is a sci-fi action-adventure and the 15th installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Set 4 months after the events of the first movie, Volume 2 tells the story of Peter Quill and his band of misfits who, after the events of Volume 1, are now these like mercenaries for hire, going around the galaxy, doing these odd jobs for people. And I don't really want to get too much more into it than that, because if I explain more about the plot, I'll be revealing some massive spoilers, and I want to keep this spoiler free. I may do a spoiler talk at some point because there's so many things that I want to get into, I want to address, I want to talk about, but I just can't bring it up in this video without, mentioning just really big spoilers. So I will hold off on spoilers for this video. I may get around to doing a spoiler talk at some point, but basically this film picks up right where the first movie left off. The Guardians are back from the get-go and we just get straight into it. Now before I get into my review of the film, let's just address the elephant in the room, and that is of course Guardians of the Galaxy. And I love the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I thought it was great. It's not one of my kind of top 3 favourite Marvel movies. I'd have it at number 4 or number 5 probably, but I do love the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not going to talk about the first movie in this video because I'm going to be reviewing the second film, and I feel like it kind of undermines and undervalues this film if you just constantly every 2 seconds comparing it to the first movie. I'm not going to do that because I love the first movie, but I love this film as well, and I think this film should be judged based on its own merits and not just be kind of constantly compared to the first movie every 2 seconds. Yes, it is a sequel to the first Guardians film, and obviously we've got the same kind of characters back from the first movie, but that aside, Volume 2 is very much its own film that I think stands on its own and should be judged based on its own merits. That's what I'm going to do in this review. Now getting into positives, of course the performances by the actors are all great. We've got all the guys back from the first film. We've got Chris Pratt back as Peter Quill, Star-Lord, Zoe Saldana back as Gamora, Dave Bautista as Drax, Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon, Vin Diesel as Groot. They're all so great in those roles. It was great to see them all back, and you can just tell when you're watching this film that they're having so much fun, and you can have so much fun and enjoy it even more so because you can tell the actors are having a real great time shooting this movie and they're having so much fun, and it just makes it even more fun to watch. And they're all so great in those roles. Obviously the first movie was a little bit of a test. They didn't really know how people were going to react. They were like, oh, are people going to like this film? But with this movie, that was all out of the way and they could just get straight into this. And it was really great kind of seeing all these characters back that we love portrayed all so well by these kind of great actors, and they all really embody their characters so well. You're never watching it thinking, oh, that's that actor. No, you watch it believing that they are those characters. They're all so great in their respective roles, and as soon as they come up on screen, you got a smile on your face. Obviously the first movie we all kind of fell in love with these characters, so it was great to see them back in this movie, and from the get-go we're straight back into it again, and we get to kind of learn even more about these characters. And that's another big positive I have to give this film. I just love how it dealt with its characters and focused a lot on the characters, because yes, this is a big, epic, really cool action movie. But what I really liked about this movie, and probably the biggest positive I can give it, is that it focused a lot more on the characters. It delves a lot deeper into these characters and who these people are kind of underneath these facades, and explores them even more so. And I really like that because it's rare you get that of a sequel. It's not just jam-packed with action scene after action scene. It actually focuses a lot on the characters, and it is, as I said, a real great, big, epic spectacle movie. But what I really liked about this film, really appreciated, was that it was a character-driven spectacle. It was an emotional spectacle. Like, it really delivered on these massive, big, really cool, crazy action set pieces and these really cool action sequences. But as well as that, it didn't disregard the characters. Like a lot of sequels tend to do this, where they just forget about kind of exploring the characters, and they just, oh no, we did that in the first movie, let's just go all big and cool and crazy with all the action. This movie does that, but at the same time it goes deeper into the characters as well. So many of the characters are kind of fleshed out a whole lot more than they were in the first film, particularly like Yondu and Nebula, which I think were really standouts. And we learn a lot more about these characters and their backstories as well, and particularly kind of like, I think Yondu was a real standout. I think Michael Rooker was really great, and also Nebula, because I wasn't a big fan of Nebula in the first movie. I think Karen Gillan did a perfectly good job, but she was kind of a bit one note in that film, and she was kind of a little bit wasted, and a little bit just a kind of a cliche generic villain. My only real criticism of the first movie is that I don't think the villains were all that great, but this movie, I really like Nebula. I liked Nebula a whole lot more in this film because the film took its time to kind of flesh out Nebula as a character even more so as well, and the relationship between Gamora and Nebula, which was touched on in the first movie, but kind of not a whole lot of time was dedicated to that in the first movie, which I understand they needed to get into it and kind of, you know, get into the story. But with this film, like I said, you know, they took its time to kind of develop the characters even more so. We got to learn more about these characters, particularly like Nebula, as I said, and I actually like Nebula a whole lot more in this film than the first movie because we learned more about her backstory. We got more there between her and Gamora, and I thought that was a real great positive. And as I mentioned, I think Michael Rooker's Yondu was a real standout as well. This is essentially kind of Yondu's film. He has quite a significant part in this film, and I think Michael Rooker did a really great job. I liked him in the first movie. I thought he was really good, but in this movie he gets a whole lot more to do acting wise. He gets a much bigger role, and he has a really kind of significant kind of a part in the story, and I think it was really great, and I loved all the scenes with Yondu. And of course I have to touch on the story here. One of the big criticisms that I think is coming up from a lot of people was that, oh, the story's a bit boring, not much happens, it's kind of just set in 2 locations, there's like 2 action scenes, nothing much really happens, it's a bit boring, it's not that great. But I would totally disagree with that. What I love so much about this film is that it was a real big, gigantic, epic spectacle, but at the same time it was on much more of a smaller scale as well. And I like the fact that they scaled it back. There's a lot of travelling in the first movie, and the first film is kind of more kind of like faster paced, so I'll give it that. You know, it is kind of constantly moving, things are constantly happening. But I don't think the fact that this movie scaled it back and was kind of slower, took its time to explore the characters more, was a bad thing. I like that. I think a lot of people seem to be taking it as a negative and saying, oh, it wasn't really like the first movie, it was a bit disappointing, it was a bit underwhelming, not much really happened, it wasn't really that exciting, it was a bit boring. But I like the story in this film. I like the fact that it was more scaled back, it was more focused on the characters, that it was more kind of emotional, it was more dramatic. It kind of, I like that. That's what I want to see a sequel do, because obviously we're going to get these big epic kind of spectacle scenes with the action, and that was all really great, but I like to see a sequel that goes deeper into the characters. It's what I liked about Civil War, it's what I liked about Age of Ultron, is that they didn't just feel like a rehash of the previous film in the series. They did something kind of completely different, where they went deeper into the characters and explored who these people really are kind of deep down, and that's what Guardians Volume 2 does, and I really appreciated it for that. It is more character driven, you know, there's just some big crazy epic action spectacle scenes, but it's very much of a character driven film, and I really like that. It was essentially a character driven drama. It was kind of slower and more kind of reflective and more contemplative and more dramatic, if you will. It's what I liked about the Trainspotting sequel, actually, funnily enough. You know, the Trainspotting sequel, it was very different to the first Trainspotting, and it wasn't as fast-paced and frantic and hyperkinetic as the first film. It focused a lot more on the characters, and it was more of a kind of contemplative kind of drama. And that's kind of what Guardians Volume 2 does as well, so I guess if you like Trainspotting 2, you like Guardians Volume 2, I don't know. But that's what I like about this film. It didn't just try and do the same thing as the first movie. It wasn't just a rehash of the first film. They did something very different. I mean, obviously it was similar in a lot of ways, you know, but it was actually a very different film to the first movie, and that's what I really liked and really appreciated. They didn't just try and, you know, rehash what was successful the first time and do the exact same thing again. You know, and I guarantee if they did do that, people would have been like, oh, why are they just doing the same thing again? They're trying to recapture the magic of the first movie and it just doesn't work, it really falls flat, they're just trying to do the same thing as they did before, it doesn't work. So they do something different and then people don't like it either. It's like, you can't bloody win. Like, what do they want? You know, they do something really cool and different that I really liked and really appreciated and I think really worked. But people didn't like that. They wanted it to be more like the original. But then I swear, if they made it more like the original, people would have complained that it was too similar. So I don't know, you just can't bloody win. I already kind of touched upon this, but I loved how kind of emotional and dramatic this film was. There were so many scenes in this film where I was like tearing up. There were just like so many really great character moments. And particular moments between certain characters that, you know, where things are revealed, I'm like, I'd never really thought about that before, but then as soon as it was like said, I was like, that makes complete sense. And obviously the big epic, and it's a gigantic epic kind of action-packed climax there, but even though it's this big action-packed finale, you know, it's very emotional at the same time. Like, I'm like tearing up watching this big epic action-packed, you know, climactic battle scene. It's like, it's incredible because it's like this giant action sequence, yet it's very emotional as well because you care about those characters, you care about what's going on, and it's just such a strong kind of emotional undercurrent to it. And of course, this is a given, but the action scenes are all great. I kind of mentioned this already, but there's so many great kind of awe-inspiring action set pieces. And yes, there's not as much action as you would expect, but all the action sequences we do get are incredible. These giant, awe-inspiring action scenes, these ginormous action set pieces that are just kind of, you know, enthralling to watch go down. Just spellbinding visuals as well. There's so many great just visual moments in this film. I just love what James Gunn brought to this, because there's so many sequences in this film that are just so crazy and wacky and just incredible and out there. And I'm just sitting there like, you wouldn't get this in any other film. I just love it. You just got to give it credit for some of the things that they do in this film, where they go even crazier. I don't want to get into specifics here, but there's a couple of moments where they just go absolutely nuts, and I'm like, I love this. Like, this is incredible. Like, this is what I want from a Guyanese movie, and this is just something you just wouldn't get in any other film. I just loved how incredibly unique it was from a visual perspective, and I thought all the action sequences were really great as well. And of course, I have to mention the soundtrack. A few people have said that, you know, the music's not as memorable in this film, and it's not as good as the first movie. I loved all the music in this film. I thought there was kind of some real great, memorable tunes. I think what a lot of people are kind of trying to identify when they're saying it's not as good as the first movie. I think in the first film, the music's a lot more kind of just overt and in your face, and it's a lot more noticeable, where in this film it's kind of blended into the world of the film even more so than it was in the first film. So it's not as noticeable, but it still works just as well. It's kind of integrated really well within the world of the film, like even more so than the first film. The songs in this movie kind of really reflect what's going on at the time, even down to some of the lyrics in certain songs as well. I love the fact that we had these really great, memorable tunes, but they all really worked within the context of the story. Like, it was all blended into the world of the film. And of course, I've got to talk about the humour. This movie was very funny. I just loved all the comedy in this film. And what's so great about the comedy is that it all comes about naturally from the characters, and just from the characters interacting with one another. The first movie played a whole kind of subverting cliche kind of thing, where you think it's going into a cliche moment and then they would implement a joke there, and it was really refreshing. This film doesn't really do that as much, and I like that. I went a different direction with the comedy. It was more just comedy that kind of just came from these characters and their personalities, and just them kind of going back and forth with one another and interacting with one another, and just the comedy that comes about naturally from who these people are and what they're like, you know, and what it's like when they're interacting with one another. And I really liked that, because it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like it was shoehorned in there. It just felt like it was coming from these characters and who these people are. And also, there's a lot of real great setups and payoffs, where there's like a line that's said kind of early on in the film, and then it comes back maybe kind of a lot later, and it links back to what was mentioned earlier. And I love little things like that, where it's like they set up something and maybe it's funny at the time, but then it comes back later on in the film and it's even better and it has even more of an impact. And I really liked how they did that with a lot of humour in this film. I really picked up on that more so the second time round. There's so many great setups and payoffs with the jokes, and I thought that was really good. So overall, as you can tell, I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I don't really have any major kind of criticisms with this film. As I said, maybe the fact that there's just so much going on there as far as the humour, and sometimes it's hard to pick up on everything because there's just so much kind of firing at you. That's not really a criticism though. I mean, I loved it the second time around, and I picked up on some things the second time around that I might have missed the first time. So yeah, there's not really anything I didn't like about this film. So overall, I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 5 stars. Is it a perfect film? No, you know, I'm not saying this is like, you know, one of the best films of the year or anything, but I really enjoyed the film. There was nothing that I didn't like about it. I didn't really have any major kind of real criticisms either, so yeah, what can I say? I love the film. And there we have it, guys. That wraps up my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Have you seen the film yet? And if so, what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this and you want to see more, be sure to click subscribe to see more. And also, if you missed my last review, be sure to go ahead and click over here to watch my last film review, or perhaps down here to catch up on my weekly show. But that said, for now, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.